All right, we just spent the last few hours talking about why you should care about Agile and what it is. And now we are going to dive into the hard part, the pragmatics of how does an organization go about adopting it. All right, so this is our agenda. We're going to talk about Agile adoption. We're going to talk about scaling across the organization. And then we've got a large section on what it takes. It takes leading for a change. The comma placement is deliberate. So let's dive in with a pop quiz. So what do you think are the top reasons? I got 6 reasons. Top reasons for why Agile adoption efforts either struggle or maybe they don't deliver the fruit of their promise or they fail outright. Any guesses? Change is hard, yep.
Or leadership too soon. Not having buy-in.
Leadership bias.
Yeah.
Organizational alignment.
Okay, all organizational. Let's go through some. First, the number 6 on the list, dev team members who just reject the idea of adopting more than just their specialty skill. Nope, I'm this, and that's what I do. I do it really well, that's what I do. Lack of framework discipline. They wander away from it. There's a good analogy, it's a baseball, it's called "we tried baseball" analogy. You explain the framework to people and then you come back a little later and you say, well, how'd you like it? And they say, oh, it didn't work for us. Well, why? Why didn't you like baseball? So tell me about your experience. Well, we couldn't afford a real baseball, but we had this beach ball hanging around, so we used that. And the bases, running around 3 bases to get back home, that didn't make a lot of sense to us. So we threw some stones out in the street, and we used that. And we didn't have a bat, but we did find a stick of wood. Anyway, we tried baseball, and we just didn't like it. We get a lot of that. No, you didn't try baseball. Right? Interfering interlopers, especially remotely or uninvolved people of higher rank who think they can just insert themselves into the process. That's another reason. An ineffective scrum master. We talked about that role. The second one is an ineffective product owner. Hopefully we've explained how that's like the most important role in this whole thing. And as you all have guessed, the number 1 reason is sins of leadership. Failure to condition the cultural soil, and resistance, avoidance, or otherwise rejecting the changes in the roles and responsibilities that they have and that are of their team. So now let's dig in and talk about how you go about adoption. This is the adoption approach that we use. There's nothing profound about it. My guess is it matches everybody else's. The first thing we go through with leaders is this exact presentation. It's help them understand, calibrate their understanding, get rid of some of the misconceptions, so we're all talking from the same page, and then try and let them know what they're in for. This is what it's going to mean. We want you to go in eyes wide open. Have that gut check. We get all done. Is this something you're still willing to try? Yep. Okay. Then the next step is to conduct a pilot, a proof of concept. Second, we'll expand that. And third stage is scaling. Now, for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to use examples from Scrum, just for the sake of consistency. We do that executive level presentation and gut check because what happens when they don't understand what they're getting themselves into, if they think all they have to do is allocate the people and the money and then they're done, what happens is it takes root at the bottom amongst the product developers. But they have no way to communicate. The leadership, the people at the top, don't understand the terminology. They don't understand, well, there's no project plan, and so informally, a new layer of management, translators, develops organically to translate from the Agile language, concepts, and theories in practice into terms and conditions that the leadership still understands. It's really wasteful. It doesn't accomplish much. If we get past that, we conduct a proof of concept, a pilot. We pick a product, we hand pick a product, we hand pick a pilot team, a scrum team, a product owner, scrum master, a development team. And we do some training, we do some coaching. We'll conduct 3 to 5 sprints with that team. It's under lab-like conditions. And generally after 3 to 5 sprints, you kind of know if it's going to work or not. We do another management checkpoint. Do you like what you see? We getting what you thought? And they may come back and say, well, let's do a few more. Okay, we'll do a few more sprints. Or nope, we're ready to go on, or no, this is not going to work here, and we'll pull the plug. Fine, we pull the plug then. But if they say to go on, then we're going to take it out of the lab and into the wild. We're going to spin up 3 to 5 more scrum teams, education, coaching, all that sort of stuff. And we'll coach each of them through 3 to 5 more sprints. We want to prove that we can produce results that are repeatable and predictable, right? And that the pilot wasn't a fluke. We do that. We say, okay, what do you want to do? You want to just continue this, do a couple more? You want to stop here? You want to go on? Because the next step is scaling. Because now we're going to talk about bringing Agile organization-wide and what that means. So if they tell us to go on, that's what we do. Scaling is really a misnomer. It's really more a matter of descaling and a lot of bureaucracy busting. Some honest to God organizational transformation. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Fundamental. The building block is the Scrum team. Full-time product owner, full-time Scrum master, full-time development team of 3 to 9 people. Dedicated, multi-skilled. Teams are organized by product. We'll get into this more later. Not by discipline, not by project, not by technology. Complex products may be required to be broken down into multiple teams. The product architecture drives the team architecture. And if you refactor the product architecture, you're going to have to refactor the team architecture.
So how often in an organization when you're trying to bring this in, would you rely on consultants to come in and do this work? Or is it better to have, I'm sure it's better to have people inside the organization doing this, but is there always people inside the organization to do this?
Right, so you're right. So you would bring consultants in to help you implement this, help you get the adoption process going, to act as guides, wagon masters, if you will. But you want to do this ideally with your own people. Now, it's possible you find out that you have a shortage. You need way more UX designers than you have. Right? We're going to have 6 teams and we got 2 UX designers. Okay, then you get the question of how do you want to build or buy that skill? We suggest that you have it, ultimately you want to have it on staff. So if you're going to buy it, you do that with the intention that they're going to train somebody in-house. So find the person in-house that can afford, has both the interest and the capability to learn that, pair them up, and this consultant's or contractor's job is to make them self-sufficient.
There's one product owner, but it looks like on that whiteboard, everybody takes ownership of the post-it or whatever's on that.
Yeah, during the Scrum team, the product owner can be there, but they only speak if they're asked a question. They don't touch the board because they're not doing any of the work.
Right, but everybody below technically,
Yeah, the dev
has
team.
ownership of their post-it.
Right.
So in that,
Because the post-its represent this is how we're going to do it.
yeah, so the part of that is, does Agile allow for people to be wrong? Because you said
Oh, absolutely.
owners has to have a yes or no on the spot.
Yes.
So they have to answer for that and it's okay to be wrong.
It's yes. You know what FAIL stands for? First attempt in learning. We're real tolerant and we believe a lot. Here's the deal, is Agile, another misconception, Agile doesn't solve a lot of problems for you. What it does do really, really well is exposes problems early so you can solve them early before they get deep. And it's based on, it's empirical in its approach. So transparency, inspection, adaptation. That's all built. That is, not only is that okay, that is celebrated. Yeah.
So if you were to implement this design framework in an organization, what's the training component that each member would have to have prior to actually coming on board? So if you're taking people from an organization to be part of these development teams,
It's a good question.
What's the training involved?
Here's our approach. We do, it comes in a couple stages. The first training, so first we've met with management, we've decided, what's the product we're going to work with, who's the team, and the first one that we spend the most time talking about, who's the right person to be the product owner, right? But then we figure out who those people are. We'll get them together, and not only them, but also probably stakeholders, and there's always ancillary people who just are curious. And we conduct a 2-day Scrum Fundamentals class. And it's really a mashup of a certified Scrum Master class and a certified product owner class. We do Scrum Fundamentals, that's a 2-day class. Then we'll take now just the team, and we do a Scrum Boot Camp, which can be anywhere from a day to 2 days. And this is where we move from the classroom into the real world. We're going to make the transition from, take all those things you learned, now we're going to take it and we're going to apply it to your product. So separately, we've been meeting with the product owner to help them create that initial backlog, right? But then we got the whole team together, and the end product of that boot camp, which can be like I said, can take 1 or 2 days, depends on the group and the product, is a sprint backlog. And then we will work with the dev team on their sprints and on their daily scrum. And like I say, you usually go through 3 to 5 sprints. They have to decide on so in the boot camp, one of the questions, what do you want your sprint cycle to be? I can give you a meritorious argument for a 1-week sprint cycle. I can give you one for 2-week. I get stretched if you want more than 2 weeks. When you have multiple sprint teams, does it make sense for them to all be synchronized? We'll talk that through. Things like this. So you get down into the pragmatics of it. But like I say, once you get them through 3 to 5 sprints, we're generally, do they get it? Or there's bumps and grinds, but it's not rocket science. They generally get it, within that amount of time. When we get to scaling, we'll conduct, and it depends on the dimensions of the organization, but we've done this with large global organizations, and we'll conduct another week-long training session, a workshop, where we actually conduct the certified Scrum Master and the certified product owner training. And then scaling training will be all part of that as well. Now, a lot of this stuff is stuff that was covered in the fundamentals, but they're going to hear it now for the first time. They didn't really understand what it meant, but now they've been through this. So they're going to hear it again, and it'll have a lot more meaning for them. And that's generally the training that we do. All right, we talked about how the Scrum team is the building block. And what you're going to do is create a peer-to-peer network of these Scrum teams. We're going to build an organization out here, a logical view of an organization. The dev teams report to a dev team manager. How many of dev team managers you need depends on how many dev teams you have. It depends on the maturity level of the managers. How many can they handle? What are the size of your dev teams? We said they're they can range from 3 to 9. So you can do that kind of math. All the product owners report to someone we call the chief product owner. Now this is, when I use the word chief, now don't think in terms of like CFO, CIO, that kind of chief. Think of like a chief surgeon in a hospital. They still do surgery. They're just the most experienced person. They're the ones who make all the tough calls. They're the ones that others go to for advice, but they still do surgeries. That's what we mean. So like the chief Scrum Master is still a Scrum Master for one of the Scrum teams, but they're the ones we want to be like the lead, to take the lead. Same with the product owner. All the product owners report into the chief product owner. You'll see why more here in a minute. But now I want to talk about layering in technical architecture. As soon as you get into this, or think product architecture, As soon as you get into this, one of the things you learn is that organizations have paid inadequate attention to their product or their technical architecture. Sometimes nothing more than lip service. And that really, remember principle number 9. This is the key to agility. And it's a pay me now, pay me later type of thing. Our approach to architecture is like this. So you're trying to create an environment where multiple teams can do development concurrently, and maybe even unbeknownst to what each other is doing, yet it all still fits together when you're done, which sounds like a fairly daunting task. The good news is society has figured this out long ago, and it's how we build cities, at least here in the US. You have a planning commission. They decide, they create a zoning plan. This is where commercial goes. This is where Class B warehouse space goes. This is retail. This is multi-family residential. This is single-family residential. So they create that zoning plan. Then they have building rules, building code. This is how you hook up to sewer. This is how you hook up to power. This is how you hook up to these other utilities. Studs have to be 16 inches on center. You must use copper, not aluminum, for wiring, and so on and so forth. And once you have those things, then anybody can come in, any builder can come in, and as long as the factories are built in the commercial zone, the retail stores in the retail zone, the single family homes in the single family zone, and as long as the studs are 16 inches on center, the wiring is a copper, and that you've hooked up to sewer and power the right way, we're good. You can all do development concurrently, and you don't even have to know about each other. There's one other thing you need though, because the people who design these, craft these architectural rules are not privy to divine wisdom. So you need a process by which you can petition for a variance when what you want to do is in conflict with the rules, but for a reason that doesn't make sense anymore. Okay? That's our approach to architecture. Now, how do you implement that organizationally? Well, keeping with the Agile way, what we want to do is add a special skill, someone on the development team. We want them to become the technical architect. Now, like the other dev team members, that is not a single skilled position. That happens to be their specialty among the many skills they bring to the table. Their reporting relationships is that they're going to report directly to somebody we're going to call a chief technical architect. Right? We talked about what that label chief means. That on a dotted line basis, but solid line, they're still going to report into their dev team's manager, whoever that is. Their responsibility is to make sure that the dev team understands, is aware of and understands the architectural rules, that zoning plan, that building code, that sort of thing, and that whatever product their team produces is architecturally compliant. That's their job. They'll represent the technical architecture to the dev team. Their duties and responsibilities. They'll participate as a member of the Technical Architecture Council. They'll represent their dev team's needs and directions when they start doing planning, additional planning, because things expand, right? Changes. And they're the one who bring the petitions for variance to the council for review and approval or whatever. That's what they do. Now, there are cases where it may be wise to create a Scrum team that simply takes care of some architectural component. That's all they do. That's their product. So you guys are responsible for sewer and water, right? Just like you would in a city. That's it. So you may have a cybersecurity team. I don't know. You know, there could be a whole list. Reusable objects, common tools, other architecture, and they may warrant their own Scrum team. If you do that, the way you work them in there, so now I've got the Technical Architecture Council with the chief architect. In some cases, you've got Scrum teams that are reporting direct. They're the dev team manager for the architecture-oriented Scrum teams, the guys who are responsible for the sewer and water. And the dev team members, who are the tech architects on those dev team members, they'll report in on a dotted line. That's how you layer in architecture. Elephant in the room. What about managers? I saw dev team managers up there. What about other managers? Okay, first thing to recognize, there's two kinds of managers. There's administrative managers. Those are the people responsible for, who's got the budget for this team? Who's going to do the performance reviews? Who's going to administer the salary increases? Who's going to approve your purchase orders? Administrative stuff. And then the other is a functional manager. This is a person who gives the individual work direction. Work on this, right? So in a non-agile world, the functional manager is often either that individual's department manager or that individual's project manager or program manager. But in an agile world, we don't need them. That role is performed by a tag team consisting of the product owner and the dev team, with the product owner stating what is needed by when, and the dev team figuring out how they're going to do it. The dev team self-organizing to get that done. So it's not a needed role. There are some other positions that are not needed. Now understand, I'm being very specific about the language. I'm talking about positions that aren't needed. I'm not talking about skills that aren't needed. But all of those positions on the left, they go away. There are 3 positions: product owner, scrum master, dev team member. Which one of those you want to be? That's it. Brian.
So in a traditional organization, you've got beginning through expert level employees, you've got your functional management team, etc. How have you seen organizations transition away from that to the Agile framework? What has kind of been the pain associated with that, and how do organizations respond?
Right. So that adoption process where we did a single isolated experiment and then we expand it, we're gradually introducing the whole concept to the organization so they get it. It's when we get to scaling when we say, okay, we're really going to do this. And we're going to talk about that for the better part of the rest of the presentation. And I will tell you, it's all cultural. It's all cultural. Here's a ground rule. No role, no position. There's no guarantees on any positions. Everybody's guaranteed to have a role though and their salary. Can you make that? Can you make that guarantee? Yeah. You may have a different role, but you're not going to lose your job and we're not going to mess with your salary. So there's ground rules like that. And as common sense as that sounds, there's a lot of gnashing of teeth over something like that. But those are some of the hoops you got to jump through. Some of the things yeah, Janice.
I just think that, I wonder if there's a way of stating that for executives of us out here, because as soon as you put up a slide that says these positions go away, and even though it's just a name, that fear wall factor of change goes straight up, because they know culture is built on the trust of your employees. So if you say your position's going away and people are tied to a position title, there may be an easier way of saying your skills are needed here,
right.
We are just using you in a different fashion. So have you found a way of saying that
So
decreases that fear?
yeah, I probably have a little too much fun with this.
Yeah.
But so now it depends on the group.
Oh, my face getting red when you said that. It's like, oh my gosh, positions are going.
So now remember, I went to great lengths to explain that I'm talking about positions, not roles.
Correct.
Right. So and then we should have talked about. I was reminded, talk about here's some guarantees we would suggest you make. Nobody's going to lose their job. Nobody's going to take a hit in their salary. But I do not guarantee that you will have the same role that you had. Now the fun that I have is just laying it out there in stark terms, like I did for you. You should see the questions that ensue after that. And I do that on purpose because otherwise they'll just sit back and be quiet. I have to give them enough that we cross over the boiling point. You know, if they just stay at 211 degrees, that stuff stays in the background. They never express it. But if I can jack them up to 213, awesome. Now we can have a conversation.
Do you see your job title up there
Yeah.
as the role that's going to be cut, and you are one of the executives?
Not cut.
One of these groups that are going away, that go away?
Positions that are going away.
Right, like you're a project manager and you're the one that's supposed to be part of this, and all of a sudden you see your name up there, your title up there as position going away. That creates some real,
You force people to re-identify, or self-identify.
yeah.
Sounds like
By the time we get to this, generally with the leadership, we've done enough work with them that we understand their culture. And we'll put it in terms and conditions that they know. Because really, here's an early lesson. The speaking in their terms and conditions, right now I say, if I speak German and you speak French, and I want to convince you that German is a superior language, in which language should I make my argument?
French.
Bingo. That's what we're doing. Rebecca.
How do core teams fit into this? So I'm trying to think of the teams that I lead have multiple functions in that, and then they each go and lead the team that they're, right? The marketing person goes and gets the marketing work done with their extended team, and legal and supply chain, et cetera. How does that fit into the organizational structure?
So now you're getting into how these things, you want to have an idea of how they're going to evolve, right? So that end in mind. If this was, if we're able to do this in an ideal way, what does the end state look like? You cannot get there in all one step, right? So you may have focused just on product development to begin with, but have, make sure the product owner is working heavy with the marketing people, right? A lot of times the product owner comes from marketing. It depends. Different companies have different cultures, right? In some companies, engineering has all the power, right? In other companies, marketing has all the power. So people say, well, where does the product owner come from? I don't know. Whatever is culturally appropriate for you guys. That's where they come from. You want to get that up and running. And then it's almost like they'll see this themselves. Well, we could make this even better if this marketing person was just either a regular member of the team, or we can get rid of a lot of bureaucracy by communicating this way or whatever. There's no one size fits all for this, because it's so dependent on culture. What I can give you is principles and things, but how those are applied is culturally dependent. Matt.
Quick question. So one of the things you talked about, and the number one reason that Agile doesn't work in an organization is sins of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But yet all the example slides go to layers of the organization that are not leadership. So in this role, because
Hang on.
like you say back here, right? I see this slide in from a leadership.
You're liking what you see, right?
Oh yeah, because we're going to cut like 10,000 people and about $4 million, right?
We're not going to cut any people.
Yes, we are cutting people. That's what it is. Say it or not, that's what they said.
That's it.
And what I would love to see.
I'm getting the feeling I'm hearing the voice of experience.
Yes. So what I would love to see is, so all those names on that side, please put CEO, COO, CIO, because what you've told me is that if they don't adopt one of these roles in this process themselves, this doesn't win. It doesn't adapt. We don't find the full value of Agile.
Hold on. So, great intro for governance structure. Here's the governance structure. The product owner team, which is led by the chief product owner, and it's comprised of the other product owners and the chief architect. Help them do architecture. They got to see where the products are going. Right? Scrum Master team, led by the chief Scrum Master, comprised of the other Scrum Master, Technical Architecture Council, just what you would expect, and an executive action team, which we'd look for a new name because EAT just Meh. You know, that's the guy. Let's see what that looks like. In an org chart form, it looks like that. So you've got the chief product owner with all the product owners, scrum master team, architect team, and then depending on how many dev team managers you have, you may want to have a dev team leader. Those layers plus the product leader, that's your executive action team. So what do these people do? Well, there is a big shift they have to go through. First is in people management. Their role shifts. Remember we said functional management, we don't need that from you anymore. We've got that covered. Their role shifts from that of an inside micromanager, that of the functional manager, to that of an intimate outsider. So now this is going to be a function of their leadership intelligence. We are going to test their leadership wherewithal, their strength of leadership. Their focus in terms of investment, it shifts from schedules and budgets to what's best investment, from schedules and budgets to what is the best investment I can make to maximize value delivered for the customer. And from the team's conformance to a plan to the team's capability to deliver that business value. Okay, does everybody get those shifts? Finally, they still retain, they've always had the environmental management thing. What can I do to the physical environment, the cultural environment, the political environment, the financial environment to help my team? I'm one of those offstage people. What can I do to make sure that what's going on stage is awesome for the audience? Their responsibilities, they need to be models, leaders by example. They need to be organizational change artists. They need to be boundary keepers, value maximizers, lean managers, organizational roadblock busters, administrative layers, providers of political air cover, and team developers. Agile also marks the end of denominator management. Everybody knows that the definition of productivity is outputs divided by inputs. Give me that, okay? You know that. Okay. Awesome. So in business, productivity then equals value divided by cost, right? We have raised a whole generation of managers who all they know how to manage is the denominator. They only know how to cut costs. They do not know how to increase value. Cutting costs is easy. Cutting costs will show results within the quarter to affect earnings per share. Delivering value is hard. Usually takes more than a quarter. But now you can't do that anymore because in Agile, it's all about creating value for the customer. What happens is rather than the denominator is about operational agility, making the existing business better. Strategic agility, the numerator, is about growing the business. And the combination then is what Agile leadership is all about. Managing the whole equation, not just the denominator. So now let's talk about the Scrum Master team. So that's that executive action team. Let's talk about the other two teams and what they do. The product owner team and the Scrum Master team. Well, first we'll choose the product owner team. As I mentioned, they work together, and by the way, they all work together. They're their own Scrum teams. They act just like a Scrum team. On the product owner team, the lead chief product owner is the product owner. They're the ones who create the product backlog, right? They go through a sprint planning process. They go through a sprint, that sort of thing. Well, what are the sorts of things that are going to be on their product backlog? Well, what's the strategic vision for the product look like? Do they have that? Do they like its condition? How's the release planning going to work? What do we got coming up? Can we release this? Should we release that? Should we wait till we have a bundle of this? You know, what should that look like? We're going to prioritize, say you've got multiple teams working on the same product. We're going to prioritize that global backlog. And then we're going to do decomposition and refinement on that backlog. And we say, these backlog items from the global backlog should go to this team, this Scrum team. This set should go to this Scrum team. This set should go to this Scrum team. So that decomp. I'll come back to these things that are shared in a second. Let me walk through the Scrum Master team. So they are constantly working on continuous improvement and impediment removal. I'm in my daily Scrum. I can't get my item done because I've run into problem X. I bring it to my team in the daily Scrum. It's something that's beyond their pay grade. They can't help me. Scrum Master's job is to take that impediment to their next Scrum Master meeting of all the Scrum Masters. Say, hey, our team ran into this. What can we do? If that impediment is beyond their pay grade, they bring it to the executive action team. Nothing's beyond their pay grade. They fix it. That's how impediments get removed. They also handle any cross-team coordination. Generally, you would like each product team to be, or each Scrum team to be wholly self-sufficient. But architectures are often so bad that there's a need for a lot of interplay between Scrum teams, therefore a need for a lot of cross-team coordination. That is the role of the Scrum Master. They talk about deployment. How are we going to put this stuff out? Together, they work on team-level processes. How can we make each team better? Right? How can we get a little more velocity out of each team? Here's something we learned over at this team. Would that be useful to these other teams? That sort of thing. They work on the metrics. We'll talk about this later, but metrics are one of the chief reasons. Metrics can give your change effort more thrust or more drag depending on how well or how poorly you do them. They're one of the biggest influencers on the success of your change effort. And I'll give you some examples when we're going to dive into it just a little more deeply. And then work together on product release and feedback. How was the product received? How did the process for implementing the product, how was that received? What does that mean for us? How should we change this? And again, each of those work as if they're the Scrum team. Now, on the Scrum Master team, the lead Scrum Master, the chief Scrum Master, is the product owner. They order their backlog. But this is the menu of stuff that they're working on. Now, what is a technical architect? So I've talked about the executive action team, I've talked about the Scrum Master team, and I've talked about the product owner team. So what about the tech architectural council? What do? Well, as we talked before, they determine the optimal product or technical architecture based on the strategic vision that's been crafted by the product owners, based on the known product backlog, and ongoing interaction with with those product owners. They define the zoning plan. This is the sort of, GUI standards, cybersecurity, stuff like that, right? They develop and support that infrastructure, the sewer, water, power, that sort of thing. They do the building code. Whenever we have dealing with financial information, you must apply mil-spec, I don't know, something like that. They do that sort of stuff. And they develop the process by which people submit and by which they will consider petitions for a variance. That's what they do. Now, when you put this all together, another goal of Agile is minimal viable bureaucracy. And we're going to get rid of a ton of crap. Here's a suggested approach. The schedule. Again, each governance team operates just like any other Scrum team. So we've got a schedule. The development Scrum teams will have their Scrum from 8 to 8:30, their daily Scrum. From 8:45 to 9, I'm giving you 15 minutes for travel. From 8:45 to 9:15, the product owner team will have their Scrum, the Scrum Master team will have their Scrum, the dev team, that dev team management team, if you have one, they'll have their Scrum. From 9:30 to 10, the Tech Architectural Council will have their Scrum. It's different because the Tech Arc's got to be involved with the product owners so they know where it's going. And then at 10:15 to 10:45, you've got the executive action team scrum. And you got the rest of the day. You don't need a status report. You don't, because the team's radiating information. They're doing burn down, burn up charts. Those are already the scrum master. That's their job, is to make sure that the team radiates information. No more weekly status reports. No more, I don't know what meetings you need other than these. We're going to get rid of a ton of crap.
What kind of resistance do you get when you first propose this schedule? Because just looking at it, you're thinking that's 2 hours out of my day that are going to be meetings. And I think a lot of times people, they probably do have more meetings, but when you just set it out like that, like every single day, how do they react?
The reactions I've gotten so far is most of them realize that's a massive reduction in meeting time for them.
There hasn't been any resistance?
Not that, actually, this is one of the huge selling points. Maybe it's out there, I just haven't run into it yet.
Because not everyone is in every one of those meetings.
Correct. That's right. Yeah, generally everyone has just one meeting that they go to. The executive action team, the product owner and the scrum master, they have to be in their teams too, right? And the individual scrum masters and product owners have to be not only in the scrum master, the global, or that scrum master team, but they also have to be in their scrum team's scrum. It's 2 meetings. They're 15 minutes. I've allotted a half hour. That's a way less. Way less. Usually there's much rejoicing over that.